So I read 14 books in the month of September, and I'm going to go through them in order. So I technically started this book in August, at the end of August, but I finished it in early September, so I'm going to count it anyway. But this book is the new Darcy Coates book, Gallows Hill. So since I already reviewed this book, I won't go into the details again, but if you want to watch the review, it'll be up here in the title card. But yeah, I really like the book. One of Darcy Coates' scariest, and it's now in my top 3. So yeah, I highly recommend it if you like Darcy Coates. So the next 2 books I read are the first 2 books in the Shadow Children series. So this is a dystopian series, and in this world you can't have more than 2 kids, and if you do, any extra kids you have will be killed by the government. So in this series we follow a child that is the 3rd child in his family, and he has to hide and keep his existence a secret. I really liked the first 2 books. It was just something I picked up at Goodwill one day, knew nothing about it, and got home and really liked it. Don't you just love when that happens? I also read Wild this month by Cheryl Strayed, and it's the only nonfiction book I read. Cheryl Strayed writes about how she hiked the Pacific Crest Trail back in the 90s. I thought the book was okay. It wasn't what I expected. I went into this book thinking I would get a bunch of like hiking and camping stuff, but I also got like details about Cheryl Strayed's sexual life and went into a bunch of detail about that, and I didn't need to know all that. It just makes it more awkward when you know that this person that you're reading about is a real person, and you're reading about this real person's sexual life. It's just, I don't know, it's not what I wanted in this book. I was wanting to read about hiking and camping, and you do get that, but you also get a bunch of her other personal stuff that I just didn't think needed to be in the book. So moving on to my favorite book I read in September, which is Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I also reviewed this book, and you can watch it right here. Fairy Tale had great characters, and Stephen King proves that he can write in pretty much any genre he wants. So I didn't love all the books I read in September, as you'll see as we go further in this stack beside me. So the next book is The Ravenous Dead by Darcy Coates. This at the time was the only book of hers I haven't read, so now I can finally say I've read all of her books. So The Ravenous Dead is book 2 in the Gravekeeper series. So the main character can see ghosts, and she lives at a cemetery, and in this book she sees a ghost that's mysterious to her, and she wants to figure out who he is and what happened to him. So I think this is supposed to be a trilogy she's writing, and so far I haven't really been loving it that much. I just think that it's been fine. It's been okay so far. The problem with Darcy Coates is she writes so much. She comes out with 2 or 3 books a year, and sometimes she gives us quantity over quality, and this is just one of those books that falls under quantity. You never know when you pick up a Darcy Coates book if it's going to be good or not. She's kind of hit or miss. With me, she's more hit than she is miss, but sometimes you can't tell. What keeps me reading her books is I like her style, and she's one of a very few authors that can actually scare me. So next is another author I really like, and I haven't got a chance to talk about him on this channel yet. So this book is called Word and Other Derelicts by Adam Neville. So I have never read anything like this book ever. I would hesitate to call this book a collection of short stories because it really isn't. It's basically a collection of just very detailed scenes. Like each story is like a painting that Adam Neville paints with his words and describes this scene, and you're left wondering what happened, what caused these bizarre scenes that he's describing. You follow no characters. There's no dialogue whatsoever. It was a really unique way to tell a story, if you want to call it that. But it's yet another book that I read in September that I didn't love or hate. It was just okay. So I read 3 mangas in September, and this is the first one I'm about to show you. And it's very disappointing because this is the worst book I read in September, and it really hurts because this is a beloved author, and I love him very much. And it's Deserter by Junji Ito. It's very rare when I ever DNF a book, but I came very close to DNFing this book. The only reason why I didn't is because Junji Ito is one of my favorite authors, and it's one of my goals to read all of his mangas. And I'm almost there. I got, I think, 3 more left. But this one was just a chore to get through. These stories were not memorable at all. Even his artwork that he's really, really known for was just average at best. And then I found out that these are some of his earlier works, and that made a lot of sense. This is not the Junji Ito we know yet. He didn't become that type of author yet. So if you go into this manga thinking that it's going to be the Junji Ito you know and love, it's not. You may be very disappointed like I was. Well, I can't say that none of the stories in there were memorable. The short story Deserter was actually pretty good. That's really the only one I could remember out of the whole manga. Unless you really love Junji Ito, I would say skip this manga. So I already messed up the order. This next book is supposed to come before Deserter. But oh well, who's counting? So next is Venus in the Blind Spot, also by Junji Ito. And this one is one of his best mangas I've read. So this manga has some really creepy and fucked up stories. My favorite one being Billions Alone, which people find these dead bodies sewn together. And yeah, that'll stay with you. I highly recommend Venus in the Blind Spot. Unlike Deserter, the stories in it are very memorable and they will stick with you. They're fucked up and creepy as hell. So next I went back to the Shadow Children series. This is book 3, and I didn't really like this one as much as the first 2. And it's the reason why I didn't continue with the series. I was planning on finishing the whole series in September, but this one just, I don't know, ruined the mood, and I decided I would finish the series at a later date. It's just more of the same stuff, and you're following a different character, and I didn't really like this character as much as the character in the first 2 books. So I don't know. I just wouldn't. I guess I don't know if it was the book or if I wasn't in the mood for it at the time. But yeah, I just thought it was okay. So going back to Adam Neville, we have Lost Girl. So this is another dystopian book that takes place in the future, and it's about a father whose daughter gets kidnapped, and he will stop at nothing to get her back. And the cops don't give a fuck, so he really has no choice but to take matters into his hands. And God help you if you get in his way. I really liked the book overall, but didn't really care for the last maybe 100 pages of the book. It can get pretty brutal too, and it isn't like a 1980s action movie either, where the protagonist is unstoppable and kills a bunch of people. No, the father in this book, you're reminded he is human too, and he does get hurt. Now, I can't really go into what I didn't like about the book because that'll get into some spoilers, but something gets introduced at around the end of the book that I thought the book could do without. But yeah, I liked it, how it started, and didn't really like how it finished. But, you know, overall, you know, I like it, and I would recommend it if you like Adam Neville. So next is Junji Ito once again, Love Sickness. So in Love Sickness, you have, I think, 2 miniseries, and then the rest of the manga is standalone short stories. So the first miniseries is Love Sickness. So Love Sickness is about these teens. They'll go and stand at a crossroads at night, and the first person that walks by, the teen will ask them their fortune. Like, will I find love in my life? And the stranger will answer their question. Yes, you'll find love, or no, you won't find love, or, you know, something like that. And teens that get a bad fortune, they'll turn up dead. So I thought Love Sickness started out strong, but then after a while, I was kind of getting, it was kind of getting old, and I was kind of getting tired of it, and wanted to move on to the next short story or miniseries in the manga. But yeah, I thought the whole manga itself was just another okay collection of Junji Ito stories. Nothing really memorable. Not as bad as Deserter, but not nearly as good as Venus in the Blind Spot. I've never given any of Junji Ito's mangas 5 stars except for one, Now, there's been mangas that's had 5-star potential, but then something kind of ruins it. And I find that very often in his mangas, there's something that he does a lot, like his dialogue. I think he has some very bad dialogue that pretty much ruins, or that could ruin a story that you're really enjoying, but it's just the dialogue is dragging it down. Or he'll have a story that has a really good premise, but then doesn't execute it very well at the end. He'll do something really absurd that'll ruin the story. And but when he does do a story really good, it'll blow you away. It'll be something memorable. And that is what I'm pretty much chasing, I guess. I'm chasing that next great Junji Ito story, and most of the time, though, I'm just let down. But what keeps me coming back is just his weird stories and his great art. I mean, that's what he does the best, is his artwork is just beautiful and fucked up. So next we have book 3 in the Expanse series, Apollon's Gate. So I've talked about my love for the first 2 books before on this channel, and I gotta say I didn't like the 3rd book as much as them. Not to say that this book was bad, it wasn't, but I found myself a few times in the book, I was just bored a little bit and just wanting it to pick up. And so yeah, there are things in the book that I did really like, but things that I just, getting tired of hearing about, or just, getting bored of. And it also could be me. It could be that I'm reading these books too fast. I think I've already read, I'm already on book 3, and I think I've started a month and a half ago or something like that. So yeah, it might be that I'm just reading them too fast, and I'm also reading them in chronological order. I'm also reading the short stories and novellas. So yeah, it could be that I'm just doing too much, and maybe I need to take a break from the series for a little while, a couple weeks. But the book did have a pretty good ending, which is always good. So the last book I read in September is book 6 in the remaining series, and it's the last book of the series. So I could safely say that the remaining series is in my top 10, maybe even top 5 series of all time. I love it. So in this series, at the very beginning, the government saw this apocalypse coming. So they took these soldiers and put them in underground bunkers all over the United States. And their mission is, once this apocalypse comes, they'll come out of these bunkers and rebuild society and rebuild the government. And in these bunkers, they have plenty of ammo, plenty of food and stuff to give to survivors, whoever they come across when they come out of these bunkers. And this is a zombie series too, so you also get that. And so in the series, we follow one of these soldiers named Lee Harden, and we follow his struggles and his victories. The series isn't scared to get brutal sometimes, and you will lose major characters along the way. I think if you're a fan of the Walking Dead TV show or the comics, I think you would really love the remaining series. I thought book 6 was another very solid book in the series, but the only thing about it is it doesn't feel complete once you get to the ending. There is a sequel series to this, which is named after the main character, Harden, but it doesn't stand on its own. It doesn't feel like it completed the original series. It just feels like, hey, there's more books after this, read the sequel series. And I don't know, that's the only problem I have with it. I wish it felt more complete. I wish it felt like it had an ending to this series. So that is all the books I read in September. I have a few videos coming here soon. I have a review for Smile, and I also have my October TBR coming. So look out for those. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you guys later.